if you were forced to wager, not based on your ideology or preference, but based on the numbers that you see in your polling business, who is most likely to win Pennsylvania if the vote was today, and who is most likely to win North Carolina if the vote was today?
I would say if the vote was today, no question in my mind.
All you timeless children with your predictions and flashbacks, trying to get ahead. What makes you think I can see you? What makes you think I believe you? Dreams inside my bed. Have you heard me lately? We were stepping up wailing, shot has come to pass. All the dreams were flying, all the thoughts were dying. Heard it's coming fast.
We're going to be having on a special guest in a few moments' time. We're ironing out some technical difficulties, but we should have Robert Cahaley, the founder and lead pollster of the Trafalgar Group, on, a Republican polling group, in just a few moments' time. Jeff, before we get to introduce Robert, how are you doing today?
All good. Looking forward to seeing Robert. You know, we had him on about 4 years ago when we had the prediction trade back then. And you know his claim to fame. He was the only pollster who correctly predicted the battleground state outcomes in 2016, specifically Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That set him apart from the polling community, started a big dialogue about polling and what's wrong with polling and how to do polling right. But some subsequent analysis that Real Clear Politics did showed him as the most successful pollster in terms of margin of error, with a 2.45 rating, which was at the top of their charts in an independent analysis that Real Clear did. So we're looking forward to having Robert on because he's kind of an outlier in his polling, and outliers are essentially what we look for in the prediction trade to try to identify pockets of opportunity in the markets. So we'll see if we can get that worked out and have him on shortly.
Well, it looks like he just flashed in, and he's going to pop back in a quick moment here. Before we get there, of course, Jeff, this has been another interesting week in politics. Betting markets are tightening up. We can go back to the screens here, gentlemen in the production studio. 50-49, Harris over Trump right now. A little bit different than what you're seeing in predicted, of course. If you look at the differences in the market, the presidential prediction, a little bit of a wider margin. In fact, that's not the right one. This is 56 cents to 48, but still a further tightening within that gap. Ultimately, some of the polls in recent days have perhaps given a more mixed picture of the race. Harris has a bit of a lead in some of the battlegrounds, but they're all within the margins of error. Jeff, you and I have frequently talked about, when looking at predicted at least, that there's probably a ceiling for either candidate right around 60 cents. Is this the start of the fade away from that 60-cent ceiling?
Well, we got close to it. Harris was up to 58, and that's exactly how you and I have been calling this. I think you could expect at this point that those numbers are going to tighten more, and that, you know, someone looking to pick up 3 or 4 cents might buy nose on Harris at 44 right now and expect that to migrate a little bit more to the mean, somewhere closer to 49 or 50. That's the only incremental trading opportunities there are right now. I think what's more interesting perhaps is looking over at the electoral college markets, if you could pull that up for a second, because that's where you're going to start to see the most activity going forward. That's over on predicted, and that's what you had up earlier. I currently have positions in 2 tranches in that market, if you can go back to that main page. And that was the, there we go. So that would be looking at the 15 to 34 tranche. I bought the GOP 15 to 34 at 7 cents. I bought the Dem 15 to 34 at 8 cents. I've got a penny profit, that's all. But you're going to, expecting a tight outcome that, based on my own calculations of the Electoral College, and particularly looking at the impact of what happens if Pennsylvania goes either way, 15 to 34 electoral votes as a swing margin is where I think the sweet spot is. But a more prudent approach would be to buy the adjacent tranches as well, 15 to 34, 5 to 14, and 35 to 64 on both sides. We approach this pretty agnostically. We're not approaching prediction market trading ideologically. So either one of those two outcomes would have a nice payoff. They're both in the 10 to 11 to 1 range right now, and I think that's where the value is in these tranches, because you'll start to see a tightening here as well. If you were to add up all the total costs here, it comes out to about 130, whereas it really should be 100%, right? Not 130%, which means this is a very inefficient market right now, and that's where the opportunities are on Predicted right now to expect this to tighten. The other commentary would be back to the markets over on Polymarket, where you acknowledge that it's much tighter. You're looking at a 1-point spread right now between Harris still in the lead and Trump. Because that market is vastly more liquid than Predicted's market, with materially more dollars invested than the Predicted market. Some estimate is close to $1 billion have been spent on this outcome on Polymarket. That's the market that's more meaningful. The more liquid market is more meaningful, and that should be how tight this race actually looks to be right now.
Well, it appears that we're going to be trying to get him in, and it looks like we got Mr. Robert Cahaley in from the Trafalgar. Yes, we can.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Can you see me?
Well, Robert,
Okay.
We can hear you.
We've got voice right now. This is Jeff Joseph. It's been 4 years, I think, since we talked, and it was in front of the last election. So it's great to have you back on with us. I'm sorry about the technical issues that kept us apart, but there he is. Nice to see you. How are you?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Good. Well, we'll cut right to the chase because we have limited time with you now. I'll let you kick off, Chris. I know you had a question queued up for him.
Robert, it's great to meet you. It's great to have you on the prediction trade. Sorry for working through those technical issues, but we have our time with you, so we're going to use it as best we can. You first appeared on the scene back in 2016. Your first public polls were released, and you were one of the pollsters who had Trump winning that race. Other groups, even Nate Silver has pointed out that your polling errors have been fairly tight. You are a reliable pollster. So what have you seen change from 2016 now? And more importantly, has the polling overall become more or less reliable when we start to think about betting markets?
Well, when we look at the difference between 2016 and 2020, it really was a matter of just, a few, literally half a point in a couple of states. But that I'm not saying that to say they did a good job in 16. I'm saying that they were off almost as bad, if not worse, in 2020 on error rate. I mean, the fact is you had all the major, TV networks and cable stations. I mean, their error rate was over 5. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, we had the number one error rate besides a group that did I think they did like 8 polls and we did like 20. But and our error rate was below 2.5. And so they were really off in 2020. They were kind of predicting a Biden landslide that just didn't happen. I mean, they were predicting big victories in a lot of those swing states, and they didn't materialize.
To jump in there real quick for context, I believe some of the final polls for Pennsylvania from some of the news agencies had Biden +8, +10 in Pennsylvania when the actual margins were right around a point.
Right. And Wisconsin, for example, which we called exactly to the 10th of a point, you had news organizations saying it was going to be a 10-point margin, and we said it was going to be a half-point margin for Biden. So it was just, they were really wrong again as far as the error rate. They were just saved by the fact that they got the winner right, but that it wasn't really a success for the polling industry. And so I'm not sure they've learned a lot about what I would call like a Trump era turnout. It's actually very different in the years that he's on the ballot than even the other years. I mean, he has an effect, but it certainly is a little different when you look at the presidential compared to any other elections.
Well, we have short time with you, so I think we want to cut to the chase. Let's talk about, focused on the battleground states right now. And first of all, let me back up. Chris and I have been discussing the premise that Pennsylvania, this is not new analysis, but that the winner will win Pennsylvania. Is that the way you're seeing it right now? Do you see a reasonable path to victory in the Electoral College without Pennsylvania? Or is Pennsylvania most likely going to be the keystone state?
I would say the winner has to win North Carolina, because if you win North Carolina, let me restate that. There's no Trump victory without winning North Carolina. and there's no Harris victory without winning Pennsylvania.
There's no Trump victory without North Carolina. There's no Harris victory without Pennsylvania. North Carolina, of course, is 16 electoral votes. Pennsylvania is 19. In your most recent poll, which your office shared with us a moment ago, in North Carolina, you have Trump up by 2.4%, 48.4 to 46. We've seen other recent North Carolina polling by your peers that suggests an opposite spread. So what is it that you're doing differently, and what do you think is the reason you're seeing a different result here that is favorable for Trump in North Carolina?
Well, I'm trying to remember what Emerson had, but I feel like Emerson was in line with what we said. But I'm not looking at it right now, so maybe not. But, most of the new polling I've seen in North Carolina does show it back moving toward Trump. So I can say that one of the things that may very well be different is that we've been polling North Carolina a long time, even before we were on the national scene. There's nothing, I started doing politics in South Carolina, so doing North Carolina races isn't really new to me. And there's a lot of strength in North Carolina, especially in eastern North Carolina, that I think is underestimated. Let's look at 2022. I mean, it was supposed to be a bad year everywhere, but in 2022, the Republicans, one of the Senate seats they did win that was open, and the North Carolina House and Senate expanded their majorities larger. So that was the new census and new data. So I think we're probably more in line with what's going to happen in North Carolina, as we have been in years past.
If Trump is to succeed in North Carolina, what segment of the voting population there will be most responsible for that victory? Will it be the shift apparently in Hispanic voting, Hispanic and Latino voting? Would it be the shift among the African-American community that's been noted? Where do you think, what's going to most materially move the needle in Trump's favor if he were to succeed in North Carolina?
I'd say both, the Hispanic and the Black votes certainly are going to be better for him than they have been in years past, and certainly kind of record-setting for any Republican in the modern era. But what I would also say is there are going to be voters in eastern North Carolina who don't usually vote, who haven't voted since 2020, who come back. And the other group, and this is one of those, you be careful what you ask for, you might get it. There's been a huge effort on these campuses to register young people, the Gen Zs. And Gen Z males, they probably wish they had registered them, because I think they're going to break in favor of Trump to the point, again, that they might wish they hadn't registered them to vote.
Gen Z males are definitely going towards Trump. And it's one of these, understandings of politics that Democrats are going to win certain demographics, Republicans will win other demographics handily. And so shifting along margins within those demographics can actually make a material difference when it comes to turnout. When we talk about these polling numbers, though, Robert, we see the national polls, and it's always, or typically in recent years, giving the Democrats a more favorable spread. Part of the common understanding of that is because California is just so darn big, and it gives Democrats such an advantage that maybe you got to shave off 2.5 to even 3 points from national polls just to account for California's influence. Is there a line in the sand that you look for, a number for the national polling average that informs you if one candidate or the other has a greater chance of winning? Which is to say, does Kamala need to have like a 3 or 5 point spread above Trump to be the winner? Or if it's within 3 to 5 points, Trump's more likely to be the winner?
Yeah, I would say that I'd go with that 3 marker, that, she has to be 3, probably 3.5, just to make sure, because you also have to consider the enthusiasm gap in some of the states that matter. Like,
right.
When we measure that, when you look at the entire nation, you're looking at 43 states who are not being inundated with TV ads, and 7 that are. Those are 2, and all those ads drive up turnout. So you have to consider that those states have a disproportionate weight to them in the overall national turnout beyond what that 7% would represent normally.
Where are you seeing the biggest surprise in your polling that you're not seeing reflected in other polling?
Well, and we say other, I mean, there's certainly polling groups that I have a lot of respect for. Obviously, my fellow co-host of the Polling Plus podcast, Matt Towery, and Insider Advantage, a lot of his stuff seems to be very in line with what we're doing. And then, Emerson seems to be very in line with what we're doing in most cases, just a few points away. But I do see I would say North Carolina, and the other I would say is Pennsylvania. We feel stronger and stronger that Pennsylvania is moving. Is that there's actually begun a little possible separation there when we measure the Senate race and the state, and the fact that that is a competitive Senate race tells you a lot about where those people are. And it also tells you, we talk about hidden vote and the social desirability bias. If that race is tied or even better, that means that there's people who are saying undecided or saying Harris that are probably voting for Trump in the other race. So that's a low watermark for Republicans that's probably going to be higher in the presidential. So I would tell you, I think Pennsylvania we're feeling like it's going to be stronger for Trump. The last time it was polled, Matt Towery was doing it, and I was polling Georgia the same night of Trump's second attempt at assassination. And we both saw in that last day of polling a significant uptick for Trump in that afternoon and evening once the news broke. And so a lot of the polls that are dragging that average down in a lot of these states were started before that, and very little post-Trump second assassination attempt numbers. And so I think that's why the averages don't reflect where it really is, because there was a little bit of a change there.
Robert, you mentioned the second assassination attempt, and that's one of a number of events that we've seen, obviously, over the course of this race have really presented a new twist and turn. It feels like there's not many significant events outside of perhaps an October surprise that could come down the pipeline that represent a potential turning point. Maybe the Walz-Vance debate that we have this coming Monday or Tuesday, October 1st. Do you see that as something that's going to be a needle mover here, or something more substantive is going to have to appear out of left field for voters?
Well, I think it really depends on what happens. I mean, if somebody hits a real knockout punch, quite possibly that thing could have a huge impact. Just either one of them just kind of really lands a good zinger, it could make a difference. Otherwise, I think that right now, one of the things that we see in all the polls is that people know who Trump is and they don't know who she is. So it's always like when we talk about, in a race, we say, all right, generic candidate versus Jones. And generic tends to win because there's lots of negative stuff known about Jones, but generic is undefined. Well, she really she gets the benefit of the doubt until she's defined. So the more she gets defined, she's likely not going up. And so I think that the more she is defined, the worse for her, because there's nothing no revelation about Trump is going to go, oh, I would have never thought that. That's just not going to happen.
As a New Yorker, he's been in the news my entire life. So when Trump does this, well, my dad's from the same neighborhood from him in Queens. My grandpa used to play golf with Fred Trump. So this is nothing can surprise me, right? I'm no one's shocked. So one more question here, Jeff, before I pass this over to you. Do you find that political betting markets influence public perception of campaigns? Is this a tail wagging the dog situation at all?
No, I don't know that they influence it. I think that it's one of those things that's kind of something that when you think your candidate's winning and the betting markets say it, you throw it out there. But when you think your candidate's winning and the betting markets don't say it, you just don't talk about it. But what I will tell you, the one thing I like about the betting markets is the betting markets are not full of nonsense, because these are people with their money on the line. And so all the BS polls and fluff and all the stuff that networks do with a thumb on the scale to try to make somebody look good, kind of pump and dump stuff, they don't fall for it. And so these are people who have done a lot of studying and really understand which polls they should ignore, which ones they should pay attention to. And that's why I think that they're just a more educated group of people. And again, when you have your money on the line, you take it more seriously.
We're down to the wire with time. If you were forced to wager, not based on your ideology or preference, but based on the numbers that you see in your polling business, who is most likely to win Pennsylvania if the vote was today, and who is most likely to win North Carolina if the vote was today?
I would say if the vote was today, no question in my mind, Trump wins. Pennsylvania is still tight. I think it is trending. Oh, no, if the vote was today. All right, if the vote was today, I think Trump would win it, but I don't know that will continue. So if you ask me,
is that from winning Pennsylvania and North Carolina? Is that the way?
As of today. I think in a in a week, Trump's going to win North Carolina, and I don't know about Pennsylvania.
And without Pennsylvania, Trump's path to victory with North Carolina makes Arizona and Nevada a must. Is that correct?
I think it puts a lot of pressure on Michigan and Wisconsin because, frankly, I've just got to be honest. I have had my butt kicked on Nevada 3 elections in a row. It's the only state I've ever gotten wrong 3 times. I will not predict Republicans are going to win in Nevada. I just won't do it.
And you have Harris ahead by 1.8% in Nevada right now. That's your
But I'm telling you, yeah, that effort that the unions do of getting those voters out is unbelievable. And usually they do quite a good job on the Saturday before the election, which makes it very hard to capture in polls. But like I said, I'm not calling Nevada red, even if I'm wrong, because my butt's been kicked 3 times on that one.
Jeff, I get that. There are sometimes I find products to trade, and if I take a bunch of losers on the nose, that's it. Doesn't matter what it's doing next. I'm not trading that market.
Got to know when to fold them.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's right.
Jeff, we have run out of time here on the prediction trade. Robert, it was a pleasure to meet you. I really appreciate your time helping inform our audience about how the state of the race is shaping up here. Hopefully we'll have you back again in the future. We didn't even get to talk about the craziness that is the New York City mayoral race now, but I don't know if we want to touch that here. But for myself and Jeff Joseph, thank you.
I'm not a big fan of Turkish Airlines first class, so I don't even understand what he's getting.
If you read the indictment, it's pretty funny because it's like, hey, are we going to do some crime here? And everyone's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Just carry on. Crime as usual. Just delete the text messages. In any event, for Robert, no, that's not how it works. For Robert Cahaley, for Jeff Joseph, and myself, Chris Vecchio, this has been the Prediction Trade. Remember, trade smartly, trust the math, and remember, come back next week for the next edition of the Prediction Trade.